Target Locked, Trump's Dirty 15 and the Politics of Payback, part 4 of 7 in a series on Liberation Day. Donald Trump didn't wake up on April 2nd and randomly throw darts at a world map. The countries hit by his tariff hammer weren't victims of impulse. They were the product of a long, calculated effort to identify which governments had been quietly siphoning American wealth for decades. It wasn't a list of enemies, it was a list of abusers. They called it the Dirty 15. Now, to be clear, there's no official document stamped and released from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative listing the Dirty 15, but the phrase came straight out of a Fox Business interview from Trump's Treasury Secretary just weeks before the rollout. The media took it from there, mapping the worst trade offenders based on surplus data and tariff barriers. So no, it's not a bureaucratic list, but it is a hit list. And on April 2nd, Trump acted like it. And if you were expecting a few adversaries and a bunch of allies to get a free pass, you weren't paying attention. This was a loyalty test disguised as a trade strategy. No surprise here, China was public enemy number one. They were hit with a 34% tariff right out of the gate. What most people missed is that this was on top of an earlier 20% tariff from the start of the year. The total burden on Chinese imports, 54%. Trump didn't just escalate, he detonated. The administration cited IP theft, illegal dumping, fentanyl exports, and what Trump bluntly called economic warfare. If this was a trade policy, it came loaded. And here's the simple math behind it all. If the U.S. sells China $100 billion worth of goods, but imports $400 billion, that's a $300 billion trade deficit. That's not trade, it's leverage transfer. And Trump's position was end it. The European Union didn't escape either. They were slapped with a 20% tariff, confirmed by official releases. Trump called out the EU's long-standing hypocrisy. NATO allies who use American defense guarantees as cover while blocking American dairy, autos, and tech with tariffs and VAT games. What's a VAT and why does it matter? A value-added tax is a hidden tax foreign countries slap on every stage of production and sale. Basically a stealth tariff on imports. Countries like China and the EU apply VATs of 20% or more on U.S. goods, making American products more expensive overseas, even if there's no tariff listed. Trump counted those in his math, and he's right to. If a U.S. company pays 20% just to sell a product abroad, that's a trade barrier no matter what the label says. He made it clear, you don't get to wave the Western Alliance flag while robbing Midwestern farmers blind. India and Brazil may not dominate headlines, but they've been gaming the system in their own way. India has kept its market closed to U.S. agriculture and pharmaceuticals, while Brazil has played the subsidy game on steel and currency. Trump's move: impose proportionate tariffs and make it clear this was a warning shot. Fix it or the next one's bigger. That said, Brazil didn't get the hammer, just the 10% baseline. Same with Turkey. Why? Because Brazil actually runs a trade surplus for the U.S. and Turkey, not big enough to burn the ammo. Not everyone on the radar got nuked. Some got a warning label. Then there's Japan and South Korea, on paper close allies. In practice, serial abusers of non-tariff trade barriers. Both have a long history of using domestic standards and inspection codes to keep out U.S. autos and consumer goods. Trump had seen enough. Reciprocal tariffs were imposed with cold precision. Message received: this isn't 1996 anymore. Canada and Mexico weren't let off the hook either, but their status is more nuanced. Both countries are covered under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which prevents the new 10% baseline tariff from applying. However, certain goods had already been subject to 25% tariffs under Trump's previous executive orders, and those remain in force. The new Liberation Day order didn't stack additional penalties, but it didn't remove the old ones either. Venezuela wasn't a direct target. There's barely an economy left to sanction. But Trump found a pressure point. He imposed a 25% tariff on any country importing oil from the Maduro regime. That move was designed to hit China and India without naming them. It's not a trade policy. It's an energy chokehold disguised as a tariff rule. Vietnam, Turkey, and Indonesia rounded out the second tier. Their crimes: dumping cheap textiles, manipulating WTO developing nation exemptions, and running trade surpluses while claiming victim status. Trump didn't need a viral moment. just a tariff hike and a message. If you want access to our market, you're going to open yours. Now, for the biggest shift, Israel. Contrary to early assumptions, Israel was not spared. It was hit with a 17% tariff, a significant rate, though not the steepest globally. This came as a shock to Israeli officials who had eliminated all remaining tariffs on U.S. imports just one day prior. It was a strategic move, a diplomatic offering. They assumed it would buy them a pass. It didn't. Trump's administration held firm, enforcing the 17% tariff as if no deal had been offered. Israeli media and trade officials were stunned. Finance Minister Smotrich had coordinated with Netanyahu to announce a complete tariff repeal on American goods. The response from the White House, thanks, but the tariff stays. And to be clear, Trump gets credit here. Israel remains the largest recipient of U.S. aid, and yet Trump didn't fold. He applied the same pressure to Israel as he did to Brazil or Japan. For now, that's a major shift. He didn't play favorites, and after decades of quiet immunity, Israel didn't walk out untouched. And that said, nobody's counting on it sticking. With Trump, everything is negotiable. If some back-channel deal gets cut in 2 weeks and the tariff disappears, nobody will be shocked. But in this moment, it was real, and Trump didn't blink. So what about the countries that weren't hit? Ukraine was subject to the 10% baseline. Nothing higher, nothing targeted. That wasn't an exemption, but it wasn't retaliation either. Taiwan, on the other hand, was hit with a 32% tariff, one of the steepest of the entire policy. Semiconductors were reportedly exempt, but the rest of Taiwan's export economy didn't get a pass. Taiwan wasn't spared, it was nailed. The point was clear. Liberation Day wasn't about handshakes, it was about pressure. For decades, these countries have run up surpluses, blocked U.S. goods, manipulated currency, or hid behind technicalities. Now, the era of polite notes and WTO arbitration is over. Trump turned trade imbalances into political enemies, and he weaponized the U.S. consumer market like a fortress. This wasn't a policy memo, it was a warning shot fired globally, without permission, and for the first time in decades, the whole world had to listen.